behind the scenes, it was always clear American officials knew more than they were saying publicly. This soldier knew that it was someone in the media and intentionally opened fire and killed her.
Well, ultimately, I think what it came down to was different pressure within the administration to not try to anger the government of Israel too much by trying to force their hand at saying that they'd intentionally killed the U.S. citizen.
They didn't want the killing of an American journalist to upset relations between America and Israel.
That's correct, at least not in terms to say that the Israelis intentionally killed her, to say they intentionally killed an American. The U.S. should have absolutely come forward and actually pressed the fact that an American citizen was killed intentionally by IDF.
Shireen!
Breaking news overnight, a reporter for the Al Jazeera network was shot and killed while covering an Israeli raid in the West Bank.
We are absolutely heartbroken to learn of the killing of Palestinian-American journalist Shireen Abu Akleh and strongly condemn her killing, as we do the killing of journalists around the world.
To 500 million people around the world, Shireen Abu Akleh was the trusted face that they would rely on for news from the Middle East. For more than 20 years as a Palestinian-American journalist, Shireen was living the very story she was covering, the Israeli occupation of Palestine.
She was, as you say, wearing a helmet and body armor that was clearly marked as press when she was shot.
Shireen was an American citizen with deep ties to the United States. Born in Jerusalem, she was raised Christian and spent much of her childhood in New Jersey. Shireen was drawn back to the region to cover the suffering and tragedy of the Palestinian people. I've been covering the Middle East for 20 years, most recently for the Wall Street Journal. I've been kidnapped in Gaza, blown up in Beirut.
I'm standing in the wreckage of my apartment.
And shot at by Houthi fighters in Yemen. I've lost journalist friends to Israeli tank fire, so Shireen's death hit me hard. Her death sent shockwaves through the region. Thousands of people lined up to mourn her. When the funeral procession set out for the cemetery, the police in Jerusalem attacked her casket, sparking even more outrage. And because Shireen was a U.S. citizen, her death and the Israeli response created an immediate crisis for the Biden administration. One U.S. official said privately that Israel had killed Shireen twice by attacking her casket.
The thing that was, very striking right at the start of this was the way in which the public statements very clearly attempted to shift responsibility for her death onto Palestinians. The very first statement that was put out by the IDF, which creates a sort of portrayal that there was overwhelming gunfire from Palestinian militants.
Immediately following Shireen's death, Israel's then Prime Minister, Naftali Bennett, blamed Palestinians for her killing and set up a narrative that Israeli soldiers would never intentionally target a journalist clearly wearing body armor labeled with press.
Investigating attacks on independent media and prosecuting those responsible are of paramount importance.
When the White House thought it was likely that Shireen had been killed by a Palestinian militant, the Biden administration called for the shooter to be prosecuted. And this was a president who said he would never tolerate attacks on American citizens around the world. However, there was a problem with the Israeli explanation. There were no Palestinian militants anywhere near Shireen or her team. Journalists at the scene said the fatal shots came from Israeli forces 200 meters up the road from Shireen. Within days, the Israeli narrative collapsed under the overwhelming evidence of eyewitnesses corroborated by video.
You know, all the investigative work that went on by both the media and other agencies into this clearly showed that initial account from the IDF was not accurate.
After a few months of evading responsibility, Israel finally admitted one of their own soldiers killed Shireen. American officials said they couldn't determine if Shireen's killing was a crime without talking to the shooter. But Israel refused to cooperate. No one has been held to account. Justice has not been served. I want to know, who killed Shireen? If we don't answer this question, more journalists, more Americans, and more innocent people will be targeted and killed with impunity. So we decided we were going to find the shooter ourselves.
All right, 3, 2, 1. All right, I'm gonna hit record.
When Shireen was killed, it was such a shock to all of us. And then to watch how Israel used misinformation and disinformation to obscure the facts for months was really disturbing to me.
Shireen was not just any journalist. She is the first American Palestinian journalist, American journalist who has been killed by Israeli forces in the West Bank.
I think the bigger story for us is why the U.S. government abdicated any role in this investigation and why Israel has refused to tell the U.S. government the name of the shooter and who the shooter was and any information about the shooter.
The Biden administration produced a classified report on Shireen's death, but they refused to release it.
We know the senior Biden people, they're not talking about Shireen's death. They're not talking about Palestinian deaths. They're not really talking at all. Are there going to be people here in D.C. over the next couple of days that are lower level that might be willing to talk?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of people here that are longtime sources that I want to hit up on this. Because it's so closed off, they're very reluctant to talk. But it's the end of the administration. You know, I'm hoping that maybe they'll ease up a little bit and be more willing to share information.
Do we think that any of them have the actual name, though?
Yeah, I don't think anybody has his name. You know, when she was first shot, the U.S. wanted to interview the guy, and Israel said no.
Do we think it's so closely held because it's embarrassing to Israel?
I think it's for political reasons. I'm not sure. There's, when we talked to Senator Van Hollen, he has read the report and he's called for it to be declassified. I drive myself crazy with this, is that people think they understand. People think they know what happened with Shireen's shooting, but they don't, right? The narrative has been so obscured by the Israeli obfuscation that even the top US officials that worked on this, I don't think really understand what happened that day.
I want to hear from somebody who was closer to it on the Israeli side.
Yeah, so one of the best people that can do that is this guy, Eyal Hulata, who was the national security advisor to Israeli Prime Minister Naftali Bennett, who was the prime minister when Shireen Abu Akleh was killed. So he was in the room when they were responding to this crisis. One of the most famous things that happened was the prime minister put out this video on Twitter, that's suggested that Palestinians had killed her. It was a video of these Palestinian militants, remember? Shooting down an alleyway, and they were like, there's a high likelihood that she was killed by Palestinian militants.
Hello. Hello.
I don't remember the prime minister ever coming out and saying that video was wrong.
I don't think the video was wrong. I think it was, it was, it's a genuine video.
But the impression was that was the place where they were shooting down an alleyway, and that they might have hit her at that incident.
Yeah.
And they showed people went to that alleyway and showed there was no way that they could have been shooting at Shireen.
I cannot refer to that. This is how they viewed it at the time.
Hours after Shireen's killing, a top Israeli general told the Americans it was very likely an Israeli soldier had killed her, even though they were blaming her death publicly on Palestinian militants.
Diane, I think it's important that we try to figure out what was being said inside the Biden administration and the State Department when Shireen was killed, and what they were thinking, what they were trying to find out from Israeli officials, right?
Yeah. Well, like everybody that I've talked to has said, if you want to find that out, you talk to this guy, Andrew Miller.
Sorry to be late. No worries. Thanks for coming. My
pleasure.
Connor, this is Connor.
The IDF written report, what it says is, Ms. Abu Akleh was accidentally hit by IDF gunfire fired towards suspects identified as armed Palestinian gunmen during an exchange of fire. But that's not accurate, is it?
It's nearly 100% certain that an Israeli soldier, likely a sniper, fired the shot that killed, or the shots that killed Shireen Abu Akleh. Based on all the information we have, it is not credible to suggest that there were targets either in front of or behind Shireen Abu Akleh. The fact that the official Israeli position remains that this was a case of crossfire. The entire episode was a mistake, as opposed to potentially a mistaken identification, or the deliberate targeting of this individual points to, I think, a broader policy of seeking to manage the narrative.
And did these Israelis ever make the soldier available to the U.S. to talk about it?
No, and the Israelis were not willing to present that person for even informal questioning.
The U.S. had requested to interview the Israeli soldier, and Israel never made him available. Why not? Why not?
Because Israel is a very good and trustworthy investigative mechanism, and we provided all of the materials to the Americans.
I think this is part of Israel's insistence that they can investigate these situations themselves and outside parties don't have any role to play. But we're still left with the question of, why did this IDF soldier fire that shot?
Did Prime Minister Bennett ever have any conversations with President Biden about Shireen Abu Akleh that you remember?
Not that I recall.
So there was never a direct conversation where Biden discussed it with the Prime Minister?
Not that I recall, but again, I can't be certain about that. I don't remember every conversation. This wasn't a topic between the President and the Prime Minister.
The day Shireen was killed, the Biden administration took a hard line and called for the shooter to be prosecuted. But when it became clear an Israeli soldier was likely responsible, the American tone shifted. Gone was talk of prosecuting the shooter. Instead, the U.S. started making vague calls for accountability.
I think there was a genuine and sincere desire at the outset to get to the bottom of what happened. But unfortunately, there obviously wasn't justice in the sense of any type of legal process.
It soon became clear we needed more help finding the Israeli shooter. So I reached out to a close colleague in Israel.
All right, what do you got for us?
Well, I have a contact in Duvdeban. I have received confirmation that he was on the scene and he participated in the operation that saw the death of Shireen.
Oh, he agreed to, this guy's actually agreed to talk?
Yeah, well, he's agreed to speak with me.
Amazing.
Duvdeban means cherry in Hebrew, and the unit considers themselves so elite, they call themselves the cherry on top of the Special Operations dessert. The only scrap of information we had about the shooter was that he was a member of Duvdevan. So Ari and I began reaching out to people connected to the unit. With Ari investigating in Israel, we keep pressing American officials for information about the shooting. One of the people who's worked to hold the Biden administration the most to account has been Senator Van Hollen.
He's really been one of the most vocal politicians and certainly the loudest senator about getting the information in this report released to the public. And we know what he's read in that report makes him angry.
He's pushed repeatedly to try and get the Biden administration to release it, and they've refused. And he said he thinks that there's nothing in this report that shouldn't be out there for the American people to see.
Did you ever get a chance to talk to President Biden directly about Shireen Abu Akleh?
I have raised the issue of Shireen with him directly, and I've pointed to a letter that I sent to him where, along with many of my colleagues, we asked for the declassification of the Fenzel report on the shooting death, on the killing of Shireen Abu Akleh. We've not gotten a response to that letter, and I've been quite clear that I think that this is an area where the president has not effectively used American influence.
And the U.S., and not just you, but also the Biden administration was pushing Israel to change the rules of engagement. And what was the Israeli response?
Well, we've seen no change in the rules of engagement. In fact, when the Biden administration called for changes in the rules of engagement after the killing of Shireen, we got a very public brush off. We're not going to change them. And in my view, the failure to have changed those rules of engagement has meant more people, innocent people, have gotten killed, including other American citizens.
How did those discussions go on the rules of engagement?
The Israelis insisted that the IDF soldier who likely fired the shot was acting consistently with the rules of engagement.
But there was no change in Israeli rules of engagement because of Shireen Abu Akleh's death?
Not to my knowledge.
Do you think that the U.S. failure to hold Israel to account for killing Shireen Abu Akleh contributed to the deaths of other Americans and journalists in the West Bank, Gaza, and Lebanon?
I do believe that if the United States had been more effective and more forceful in insisting that the rules of engagement changed after the killing of Shireen Abu Akleh, that we could have avoided the deaths of these other Americans and other civilians.
To be crude about it, it's often like Israel is giving the big FU to America on these kinds of issues.
I have said on American television that that is effectively the case, that, Prime Minister Netanyahu is giving the finger to President Biden.
The Biden administration claimed it couldn't say if the shooter intentionally killed Shireen because of Israel's refusal to provide access to the shooter. But behind the scenes, it was always clear American officials knew more than they were saying publicly. After months of trying, I finally found a key Biden administration official who was willing to pull back the cover on the U.S. investigation. Based on everything that the U.S. was able to find out about Shireen Abu Akleh's killing, what was the initial conclusion?
The evidence as it stands based on the proximity of the reporters in the road and the soldiers from the Duvdevan units on the street, it was an indication that it was an intentional killing of, at this point in time, Shireen Abu Akleh. Whether or not they knew it was her or not can very well be debated, but they would have absolutely known that it was a media person, or not combatants at a minimum, that person shot and killed her.
This soldier knew that it was someone in the media and intentionally opened fire and killed her?
Actually knew it was non-combatant, and every indication that it was media, because it was clear within all optics from that distance and location, and visual capabilities of that day.
So your belief is that that soldier looked down his scope and could see the blue vest and that it said press?
That's my belief, yes. So it changed ultimately to be that it was a tragic accident versus being an intentional killing of the individual.
That's shocking to hear.
Well, ultimately, I think what it came down to was different pressure within the administration to not try to anger the government of Israel too much by trying to force their hand at saying that they'd intentionally killed the U.S. citizen.
To go from saying something is an intentional killing to a tragic accident is night and day.
It absolutely is.
They didn't want the killing of an American journalist to upset relations between America and Israel.
That's correct, at least not in terms to say that the Israelis intentionally killed her, to say they intentionally killed an American.
Would you say that the Biden administration failed Shireen Abu Akleh?
I would say so. The U.S. should have absolutely come forward and actually pressed the fact that an American citizen was killed intentionally by IDF.
Hey, it's Ari.
He's calling?
Yeah. I'm gonna put him on speaker. Hey, Ari?
Hi, Dion.
Hey, man. How's it going?
It's all right. Connor, you there?
Hey, what's up?
All is good. Have something of an interesting development
What's up?
to share. So there was one contact. He told me that he's just got out of Gaza.
Whoa.
And we got to talk, but he was very well acquainted with someone who was there that day, who participated in the operation. After a little while, he seemed to suggest that this person he was talking about was actually the shooter.
Really?
Wow.
But here's the twist.
I think we've gotten as much as we're gonna get out of officials here in Washington.
We got to talk to Fatima, and we got to talk to people who are eyewitnesses. We just have to go over to Israel.
Before meeting with Ari, we wanted to see with our own eyes where Shireen was killed and get a first-hand account of what happened that day. Shireen wasn't the only person shot. Her producer, Ali, was also hit by an Israeli bullet. So how long do you think it's going to take us to get up there?
On a good day, it's an hour and a half. But now the checkpoints are all over the West Bank. It's not just in Jenin or around Jenin because of the military operation. So we're going to have to deal with each one as we get there because it's changing every minute. Amazing.
The challenge with meeting Ali is that he's in Jenin, the city where Shireen was killed. Usually, it's a bustling Palestinian city. Today, it's a ghost town.
We want to go to the site where Shireen was killed. We need to go down that road, and that's the road, unfortunately, that is leading to the single checkpoint where the Israeli military is not allowing people.
This is live in the camp, just basically right outside here.
We've heard at least 2 or 3 explosions so far, right?
Yeah.
And we can hear the drones going overhead, right?
It didn't stop. And we're still waiting for Ali to come. I hope that he could make it to us.
يعطيك العافية علي. شكرا كثير إنه عم تلتقي معنا بعد هذا اليوم الطويل. Thank you very much for meeting us.
We are set up here now, even though it's We were supposed to meet at the location where you got injured and Shireen got killed.
We are 5 minutes from the location in Meydan al-Auda, but you could lose your soul in the 5 minutes it would take us to reach it. You could be hit by army bullets. They could arrest you. So it is essentially impossible to get there. I believe the big disaster which prevented the occupation from being punished and repeating these crimes is the neglect and indifference by many of the institutions, especially American ones, which continue to defend the occupation.
We're now approaching the 3rd anniversary of Shireen's death. How did that affect you?
During that period, the occupation was making preparations for a dangerous scenario in the Jenin refugee camp. And for this reason, they didn't want witnesses. They opened fire on us in order to terrorize us enough that we wouldn't go back to the camp. And in that sense, they partially succeeded. Since then, we have been overcome by fear. From the moment Shireen was killed, I said and continued to say and will continue to say that this bullet was meant to prevent the Palestinian media from the documentation and exposure of the occupation's crimes.
This is the main roundabout. This is Al Manara Square. And that's Al Jazeera's office. Shireen's office was right there. It's closed now. You can go up and see the door, but it's welded. We cannot go in.
The Israeli military came in, right, and shut it down?
They did. You can see.
Israel is now the most dangerous country in the world to be a journalist. Israel was never in that category before until Shireen and until what's happened over the last year and a half.
Yeah. Well, saying this and seeing this reflected in numbers is good, but it still doesn't depict the fear that this has instilled inside me as a journalist. I'm not trying to play brave or pretend that I am going to be like, I'm a mother also. I'm a human being. I'm a Palestinian. I happen to live in this country and I'm doing my best to survive. But with every movement, I feel like every day can be my last. I don't know if you can imagine this, but I feel like every day can be my last. The thing is not about taking precautions because we saw what Shireen did. Shireen, Ali, Mujahid, Shaba, we saw what they did. It was clear they took all precautions and they still got shot at. And we lost Shireen that day.
Do you do anything differently in how you operate in these areas after Shireen's death, do you think?
I don't think that I do things differently in my work, but I do things differently as a mother now.
Really? Like what?
I hug my children more often. I always kiss them before I leave because it might be the last time. You never know.
Shireen's death didn't just impact journalists. It left a huge hole in her family and her community.
وجميع الراقدين على رجاء القيامة من هذه العائلة.
قدوس الذي لا يموت ارحمنا. قدوس الله قدوس القوي قدوس الذي لا يموت ارحمنا.
قدوس الله
قدوس القوي قدوس الذي لا يموت ارحمنا.
بصلوات أبائنا القديسين أيها الرب يسوع المسيح.